Imagine waking up in a world without letters. Your grandmother's stories vanish the moment they are spoken. Laws are remembered only by those who heard them. Poetry drifts like smoke and disappears with the wind. The past is a rumor. The future has no map. Now picture a coastline dotted with busy harbors, sails catching the light, sea salt clinging to traders' clothes. This is where a bold idea takes root. Not an empire built with iron and walls, but a simple code written with ink and hope. An alphabet. These traders are the Phoenicians. They carry purple dye that gleams like twilight and cedar wood that smells of the mountains. They talk with Egyptians, argue with Greeks, do business with anyone who will listen. But business needs memory, and memory needs speed. In a world of complicated symbols that demand years of training, they want something quick, clear, and human. Something that any clever ship hand can learn on a long voyage between islands. So they start to strip writing down to its bones. They do not draw whole words as pictures. They listen closely to the sounds of speech, the way a word opens with a breath or closes with a click of the tongue. They craft signs for those sounds. 22 shapes. No vowels at first, just the sturdy framework of consonants that readers can complete with their own voice. It is like leaving the outlines of a song and trusting the singer to fill the notes. Simple, yes. But in that simplicity, a doorway opens. Picture a contract written fast on a scrap of papyrus while the tide is rising. A message scratched onto a shard of broken pottery and sent across the market. A young apprentice tracing letters by lamplight, realizing he can now write the words his father speaks. Literacy loosens its grip from the hands of a few and begins to spread across docks and workshops. The alphabet does not ask for a lifetime with a royal scribe. It asks for curiosity and practice. It invites people in. Here is a curiosity that always makes me smile. The first two letters, Aleph and Bet, give us the word alphabet. Aleph began as the outline of an ox head, a memory from the days when pictures tried to carry meaning. Bet once meant house, a reminder that letters grew out of everyday life. The shapes changed over centuries, but the names whisper where they came from, and the journey does not stop at the edge of Phoenicia. Sailors carry the letters like charms in their pockets. In Greece, new voices add vowels and give words greater music. Later, Rome shapes those letters into forms you still recognize on street signs and book covers. Far away, other languages reshape the idea again and again. The seed planted by merchants grows into forests of scripts. The Phoenicians did not conquer with armies. Their writing spread for a simpler reason. It worked. It saved time. It made trade smoother and memory steadier. It turned speech into something you could fold, carry, store, and send. Even the city of Byblos, a place known for shipping papyrus, leaves its echo in the word Bible. That is how tightly writing and daily life were woven together. But let us return to that coastline for a moment. Fires burn. Libraries fall. Empires around them rise and crumble, and so do many of their cities. Yet the letters endure. They hide inside prayers and poems, in the lists of goods on a ship's manifest, in a child's first careful lines. Ideas are stubborn like that. They outlast stone. So when you text a friend or underline a sentence that moves you, you are part of this long story. You are using a tool that began on decks slick with seawater and in markets loud with bargaining. 22 signs, shaped by need and imagination, set the stage for almost every word you read today. Why did they invent it? Because life demanded it. Because people needed a faster way to remember promises and prices and wisdom. How did those 22 symbols cross seas and centuries? They traveled the same way stories do, by being useful and easy to love. If this journey through time sparks your curiosity, stay with us. Like the sailors who once shared letters along the coast, share this story with someone who loves the past. Tap like if this history speaks to you, pass it along to a friend, and subscribe to Legacy of Empires so we can keep exploring the ideas that quietly shaped our world. Picture the bustling port of Tyre in the 13th century before Christ. Ships from across the Mediterranean crowded the harbor, their holds heavy with precious cargo. cedar wood from Lebanon, silver from Spain, and that legendary Tyrian purple dye that would soon adorn the robes of kings. But here's what made these Phoenician merchants different from everyone else. They were always in a hurry. While Egyptian scribes spent days carefully painting hieroglyphs on papyrus, and Mesopotamian clerks laboriously pressed cuneiform into clay tablets, Phoenician traders watched their ships leave without proper documentation. Imagine a merchant trying to seal a deal for a shipment of purple dye worth a fortune, only to discover that writing the contract would take longer than the actual voyage to Greece. The existing writing systems weren't just slow, they were impossibly complex. Egyptian hieroglyphs used hundreds of different symbols. Some represented sounds, others entire words, and still others were just there to help you figure out what the other symbols meant. It was like trying to text using only emojis, but with 1,000 different emojis to choose from, and half of them meant something completely different depending on what came before. Cuneiform wasn't much better. The wedge-shaped marks pressed into clay could represent syllables, entire words, or abstract concepts. A single symbol might have a dozen different meanings. Scholars spent years just learning to read, let alone write fluently. For a civilization built on quick transactions and rapid communication across vast distances, this simply wouldn't work. So the Phoenicians did something revolutionary. They looked at all these complex systems and asked a simple question: what if we didn't need thousands of symbols? What if we could break down every word, every sound, into just a handful of basic building blocks? Their solution was breathtaking in its simplicity. 22 symbols, that's it. Each one represented a single consonant sound. No pictures of birds or eyes or water, no syllables that could mean 5 different things, just pure, distilled sound. Here's the truly fascinating part. They completely abandoned vowels. Every word was written as if you were sending a telegram and had to pay for each letter. Instead of writing trade, they wrote turdi. Instead of ship, they wrote shp. It sounds impossible, but think about how easily you can read txtmsg or understand brb in a message. Context fills in the gaps. This wasn't just a writing system. It was a communication revolution designed by people who understood that in business, every moment counted. A Phoenician merchant could scratch out a contract on a piece of pottery in minutes, not days. They could keep quick records, send brief messages, and most importantly, teach their system to others without requiring years of training. The beauty of their invention lay not in what it included, but in what it left out. By stripping away everything except the essential consonant sounds, they created something that was almost impossibly easy to learn and use. A young trader could master the entire alphabet in weeks, not decades. And here's perhaps the most remarkable thing of all. This system worked so well that people didn't just adopt it, they couldn't live without it. When Greek merchants encountered Phoenician writing, they didn't see it as foreign or primitive. They saw the future. They took those 22 letters, added their own vowels, and created the foundation for virtually every alphabet we use today. The Phoenicians had solved the greatest communication challenge of the ancient world, not through complexity, but through brilliant simplification. They proved that sometimes the most powerful innovations come not from adding more, but from taking away everything that isn't absolutely necessary. The most remarkable thing about the Phoenician alphabet wasn't how it was invented, it was how it spread. Picture this. No armies marching to impose a new writing system, no imperial decrees forcing people to abandon their ancient scripts. Instead, something far more powerful happened. The alphabet spread because people simply couldn't resist its elegance. Let's start with the Greeks in the 8th century before Christ. Greek merchants had been trading with Phoenicians for generations, watching these seafaring businessmen scribble quick notes that somehow everyone could read. The Greeks had their own writing system called Linear B, but it was so complicated that only palace scribes could master it. When Greek civilization collapsed around 1200 before Christ, most people simply forgot how to write altogether. Then came the Phoenicians with their 22 letters, and suddenly a Greek potter could learn to write his name in a week. A Greek farmer could mark his goods for market. A Greek poet could capture verses without needing a professional scribe. But the Greeks noticed something missing, those vowels that made pronunciation clear. So they did something brilliant. They took some Phoenician letters they didn't need and turned them into vowel sounds. The Phoenician letter Aleph became alpha, Bet became beta. And just like that, we get our word alphabet from these first two letters. The Greeks didn't just adopt the Phoenician system, they completed it, creating the first true alphabet where every sound, consonant, and vowel alike had its own symbol. But the story doesn't end there. As Roman power grew across the Mediterranean, they encountered this Greek alphabet and saw its potential immediately. Roman efficiency demanded clear communication across vast territories. How do you govern an empire stretching from Britain to Egypt without a writing system that anyone can learn? The Romans refined the Greek letters, standardizing the shapes we still recognize today. That elegant curve of the letter S, the strong vertical line of I, the balanced symmetry of O. These are gifts from ancient Roman stonecutters and scribes. Meanwhile, something equally fascinating was happening in the East. Hebrew scribes encountered the Phoenician alphabet and recognized something profound. Here was a writing system that could capture the sacred sounds of their prayers and laws. They adapted the Phoenician letters to write Hebrew, creating what they called the Aleph-bet, literally taking the names of the first two Phoenician letters. The same thing happened with Arabic, which developed its flowing script from the same Phoenician roots. Here's where the story gets almost magical. In the ancient Phoenician city of Byblos, something special was happening that would connect this civilization to writing forever. Byblos had become the Mediterranean's papyrus capital, importing the precious writing material from Egypt and redistributing it across the known world. When Greeks wanted to write on something better than pottery shards, they bought papyrus from Byblos. Eventually, they started calling papyrus itself Byblos. Centuries later, when the first Christian communities began collecting their sacred writings, they needed a word for their holy book. What did they call it? Biblia, literally meaning the papyrus from Byblos. The word evolved into Bible, creating an eternal link between the Phoenician city that supplied the writing material and the people who invented the letters themselves. But perhaps the most incredible part of this story is what the Phoenicians didn't do. They never conquered anyone to spread their alphabet. They never forced other cultures to abandon their writing systems. They simply made something so useful, so efficient, so perfectly designed for human communication that civilization after civilization chose to adopt it freely. Think about that for a moment. The Phoenicians created something so valuable that it outlasted their ships, their cities, even their language. Long after the last Phoenician merchant had sailed into history, their letters continued their journey. They sailed with Roman legions to Britain, traveled with Islamic scholars to Spain, crossed oceans with European explorers to the Americas. Today, whether you're reading English, Spanish, French, German, or dozens of other languages, you're looking at descendants of those original 22 Phoenician letters. The alphabet conquered empires not through force, but through pure utility. It gave humanity a tool so fundamental that we can barely imagine civilization without it. The Phoenicians proved something profound about human innovation. The most lasting revolutions aren't won with swords or laws, but with ideas so good that people can't help but embrace them. Their alphabet didn't just spread, it became part of the very DNA of human communication, writing itself into the future of our species. Are you fascinated by this ancient legacy? Then comment your thoughts, like the video, share it with fellow history lovers, and subscribe to Legacy of Empires for more epic journeys. There's something haunting about walking through modern Lebanon and realizing you're standing where one of history's greatest civilizations once thrived. The mighty cities of Tyre and Sidon, Byblos and Arwad, these weren't just trading posts, they were the beating heart of Mediterranean commerce for over 1,000 years. Yet today, most people couldn't even point to Phoenicia on a map. The fall began in the 6th century before Christ, when Babylon's armies swept down from the north. King Nebuchadnezzar laid siege to Tyre for 13 long years, turning the island city into a symbol of defiance against overwhelming odds. But even Tyre's legendary walls couldn't hold forever. Later came Alexander the Great, who built an entire causeway from the mainland just to reach the island fortress. One by one, the great Phoenician cities fell to foreign conquerors. Imagine being a Phoenician scribe in those final days, watching your civilization crumble around you. The great libraries of Tyre, filled with centuries of accumulated knowledge, went up in flames. Ships that had once carried Phoenician merchants to distant shores now carried refugees searching for new homes. The language that had echoed through marketplaces from Spain to Cyprus began to fade into silence. But here's where the story takes an extraordinary turn. While Phoenician cities burned and Phoenician ships sank beneath the waves, something invisible and indestructible was already spreading across the ancient world. Their alphabet had taken on a life of its own. In Greek temples, priests were copying down sacred hymns using letters descended from Phoenician script. In Roman forums, senators were debating laws written in an alphabet that traced its ancestry back to Tyre and Sidon. Jewish scribes in Jerusalem were carefully preserving their most sacred texts, using Hebrew letters born from Phoenician innovation. The Phoenicians themselves might have vanished from political maps, but their greatest creation had already achieved a kind of immortality. Think about a Phoenician trading vessel from the 7th century before Christ. The ship itself rotted away millennia ago. The cargo was sold or stolen. Even the captain's name is lost to time. But if that captain kept a simple log of his journey, writing down ports visited and goods traded in those 22 letters, he unknowingly contributed to humanity's greatest communication revolution. The alphabet survived because it had already escaped its creators. It lived in the daily records of Egyptian merchants who found Phoenician letters easier than hieroglyphs. It thrived in Greek poetry that could now be written down and shared across the Aegean. It flourished in Roman legal documents that needed to be clear and readable across a vast empire. But the most remarkable discovery about Phoenician survival came not from ancient texts or archaeological digs. It came from modern genetics laboratories. In the early 21st century after Christ, scientists began analyzing the DNA of people living in modern Lebanon, the heart of ancient Phoenicia. What they found was extraordinary. The genetic markers of those ancient maritime traders are still there, passed down through nearly 3,000 years. The Lebanese people of today carry in their very cells the biological heritage of the merchants who invented our alphabet. It's as if the Phoenicians left two legacies, one written in letters that spread across the world, and another written in the genetic code of their descendants who never left home. Even more fascinating, researchers found that certain Lebanese families show genetic connections to ancient Mediterranean populations, suggesting that some Phoenician traders settled permanently in distant colonies, carrying their alphabet and their genes to new shores. The descendants of these ancient merchants are living today in Tunisia, Cyprus, and even southern Spain, walking proof that Phoenician influence reached far beyond what any history book could tell us. This creates an almost mystical connection between past and present. When a modern Lebanese person writes their name using Arabic letters, which descended from the same Phoenician alphabet, they're using a writing system invented by their own genetic ancestors. The letters flowing from their pen carry forward both biological and cultural inheritance spanning millennia. But perhaps the most beautiful part of this legacy lies in something even more universal. Every time you send a text message, sign your name, or read these very words, you're participating in an unbroken chain of communication that stretches back to those ancient harbors of Phoenicia. The shapes may have evolved, the languages may have changed, but the fundamental principle remains the same. Simple symbols representing basic sounds, combined to capture every human thought. The Phoenicians discovered something profound about human nature, that our need to communicate, to record, to remember, is stronger than any empire. Cities fall, libraries burn, entire civilizations disappear from memory. But a good idea, a truly useful innovation, becomes part of humanity itself. It weaves itself so deeply into the fabric of human culture that removing it becomes impossible. In the end, the Phoenicians achieved something greater than military conquest or political dominion. They gave humanity a gift so fundamental that we can't imagine life without it. Their cities may be ruins, their ships may rest on the ocean floor, but every letter you'll ever write carries forward their greatest triumph, the democratization of human expression through the simple, elegant power of the alphabet. Here we stand, 3,000 years later, and the Phoenicians are still with us, not in museums or history books, but in the very words flowing across your screen right now. Every letter you're reading carries the DNA of those ancient 22 symbols carved by merchants who just wanted to write faster contracts. Think about the profound irony of it all. The great pyramids of Egypt still tower over the desert, monuments to pharaohs whose names we remember. Roman roads still connect cities across Europe, testaments to imperial engineering. But the Phoenicians, who built neither pyramids nor roads, achieved something far more lasting. They didn't conquer territory, they conquered human thought itself. When you tap out a quick message on your phone, you're using a communication system that would be instantly recognizable to a Phoenician trader from the 10th century before Christ. The letters have evolved, the languages have changed, but the fundamental principle remains identical. Simple symbols representing basic sounds, infinitely combinable to express any human thought. Consider what this means for a moment. The greatest military empires in history controlled vast territories for centuries, then crumbled into dust. The most magnificent buildings eventually collapse. Even the mightiest kings are forgotten. But an idea, a really good idea, can literally reshape the future of human consciousness. The Phoenician alphabet did something that no army could accomplish. It made knowledge democratic. Before their innovation, writing was the privilege of specialized scribes who spent decades mastering complex systems. Only the wealthy could afford to hire someone to record their thoughts. Only priests and palace officials could read the laws that governed their lives. The Phoenicians changed all that forever. Suddenly, a Greek farmer could learn to write poetry. A Roman soldier could send letters home to his family. A Jewish merchant could keep his own business records. For the first time in human history, ordinary people could capture their thoughts, preserve their stories, and communicate across vast distances without depending on professional intermediaries. But let's imagine for a moment what the world might look like if the Phoenicians had never simplified writing. Picture trying to build modern civilization using only pictures and complex symbols. Could Shakespeare have written his plays if English required mastering thousands of hieroglyphic characters? Could the scientific revolution have happened if every equation needed to be drawn like an ancient Egyptian wall painting? The ripple effects stretch in every direction. Without simple alphabetic writing, would we have developed printing presses? Could newspapers have existed? Would the internet be possible if every website required readers to decode pictographic symbols? The Phoenician alphabet didn't just make writing easier. It made the entire information age possible. Here's something that might surprise you. Scientists estimate that learning to read Chinese, with its thousands of characters, requires about 12 years of dedicated study. Learning to read English, with its 26 letters descended from that original Phoenician system, takes most children just 2 to 3 years. That difference represents millions of hours of human time redirected from learning symbols to learning ideas. The Phoenicians also solved another crucial problem that we rarely think about today: cultural transmission. Complex writing systems create barriers between civilizations. Egyptian hieroglyphs worked beautifully for Egyptians, but they were nearly impossible for foreigners to master. Phoenician letters, however, were so simple and logical that they could jump from culture to culture, adapting to new languages while maintaining their essential character. This adaptability explains how the same basic system could evolve to write Hebrew prayers, Greek philosophy, Latin laws, and eventually English novels. Each culture took the Phoenician foundation and made it their own, but the underlying structure remained intact. It's like a universal grammar of human communication, flexible enough to capture any language, while simple enough for anyone to learn. Perhaps most remarkably, The Phoenician legacy continues to evolve even today. When computer programmers developed digital communication, they didn't invent entirely new symbols. They took those same ancient letters and taught machines to understand them. When we created the internet, we used alphabetic addresses and text-based commands. Even as we move toward voice recognition and artificial intelligence, the alphabet remains our fallback, our most reliable way to store and transmit human knowledge. The Phoenicians understood something fundamental about human nature. We need to communicate, and we need to do it efficiently. They realized that the best solutions aren't necessarily the most elaborate ones. Sometimes the most powerful innovations come from stripping away complexity rather than adding it. Their alphabet succeeded because it solved a universal human problem with elegant simplicity. It proved that ideas don't need armies to conquer the world, they just need to work better than anything else available. The Phoenician letters spread not because anyone forced them to, but because once people tried them, going back to more complex systems felt impossible. So the next time you write your name, send an email, or read a book, take a moment to appreciate the incredible journey that brought those letters to you. They've traveled through 3 millennia, crossed oceans and continents, survived the collapse of empires and the birth of new civilizations. They've been carved in stone, written on papyrus, printed on paper, and displayed on screens, yet they remain fundamentally unchanged. The Phoenicians may have disappeared from history, but they achieved something far greater than political immortality. They became part of human consciousness itself, woven so deeply into how we think and communicate that we can't imagine existence without them. In giving us the alphabet, they didn't just write the future, they became it. What lessons can we draw from this ancient tradition? Tell us in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Legacy of Empires for more untold stories of the ancient world.